I kind of wish they would just let the Toy Story series die. They just released a trailer for Toy Story 5 coming out next summer. Now, I realize this is an unpopular opinion. Toy Story 4 made a huge amount of money, everybody loved it. I realize these films are not for me. I'm incredibly old. I also realize that with this premise, there's no reason you couldn't just have toys going on adventures forever. You could make a TV show out of it. From the start, can we agree that everything about this series is incredibly old? The first film came out in 1995, 30 years ago. And it was about an old toy. I mean, that was the point. Woody is an antique. He's based on a TV show from the 1950s or 60s. In fact, the central conflict is about the transition from the era of toys that were all about the Old West to stuff that was more about the future. The plastic sci-fi toys from the 80s and 90s that were more high-tech, Buzz lights up and he has pre-recorded voice lines, stuff like that. In other words, the film in 1995 was aimed squarely at people who had grown up in the 80s. If you were 10 years old at the time, you saw this transition happen in toys. And then for the grown-ups in the audience, there were all of these themes about the fear of being replaced, of your time passing you by and getting replaced by something shiny and new. But that's the first part of my problem with the series continuing, which is that it was never just a series of adventures for these toys. There was always a very specific story they were telling, stories about transition, about children growing up and moving on, and about the toys themselves having to move on. And in fact, as the series continued, it really did feel like they were writing it more and more for the adults in the audience. The funniest character in Toy Story 4 was based on this toy from 1973. This is Evel Knievel. Do any of you kids out there know who Evel Knievel is? And then there's the fact that Toy Story 3 was very clearly intended to be the end of the series. It brought everything to a close. It's almost like the writers were saying to the studio, move on. The kids who saw the first film now have grandchildren. But that's the irony here, because this franchise is a sign of our culture's inability to do the thing they're talking about in these films, our inability to move on. Give the kids of today their own thing. Mr. Potato Head was an old toy when I was a child, and I am 1,000 years old. The main voice cast are in their 70s now. At least 2 of them are dead. Why are we still making kids watch stories about the stuff their grandparents were into?